Okay, so get ready for this. Today, we're going deep, all the way to Australia. We're diving into the world of research and development, R&D. We got a ton of research and articles to dig through, all about how Aussie businesses are innovating. We'll be looking at the role of the Australian government, and get this, we've even got a case study lined up. It really highlights how powerful R&D can be. So buckle up, because in this deep dive, you might just learn a thing or two about the land down under.
It's interesting. When people think about R&D, they often picture scientists in lab coats,
Hmm.
surrounded by those bubbling beakers. But honestly, R&D is happening all around us, probably even in your own neighborhood.
Really, so it's not all high-tech labs
No.
and billion-dollar
No,
experiments.
not at all. R&D is basically any time a business tries something new, to improve what they do. Think about your favorite restaurant, the one that always has a new special on the menu. Well, they had to come up with that recipe, test it, probably change it a few times. That's R&D in action.
Hold on, are you saying that even that amazing spicy aioli at my favorite burger place could be a product of R&D? My mind is blown. I always thought they were just culinary geniuses, just whipping up these creations on a whim.
Uh-huh. Well, culinary genius might be part of it. But yeah, there's definitely R&D involved, and that's a great example. It shows how R&D isn't just for big companies. Small businesses can do it too. It's about innovating and getting better at what you do.
That makes a lot of sense. But even if it's not all high-tech, I bet it still takes a lot of resources. I mean, coming up with a new burger sauce is one thing, but developing something groundbreaking, like a new type of solar panel, that's going to be way more expensive, right? And risky.
You're absolutely right. Cost and funding are the biggest challenges, especially for smaller businesses. You have to weigh the potential benefits against the cost of the research. Sometimes it's a gamble companies just can't take.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that brings up a question. Should the government step in to help? I mean, if R&D is so important for the economy and for progress as a country, shouldn't there be more support for those businesses that are trying to innovate?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. And there are some pretty strong opinions on both sides of that debate. Our sources actually highlight two contrasting viewpoints.
Ooh, a good debate. I'm all ears.
All right, well, on one side, we have Rick Holliday Smith. He's the former chairman of Cochlear Limited. They're the company behind those amazing hearing implants, so he definitely knows a thing or two about R&D. His view is that the government should provide more incentives to encourage companies to do R&D. Things like tax breaks.
So like dangling a carrot. To get businesses to do more research, that's a pretty classic approach. What about the other side?
The other side is represented by Professor Barney Glover. He's the Vice Chancellor of Western Sydney University. And his take is that just giving companies tax breaks might not be the most effective approach. He believes the government should directly fund collaborations between businesses and research institutions, like universities.
Oh, interesting. So instead of just incentivizing individual companies, he's talking about building a system where knowledge is shared more easily.
Exactly. It's like cross-pollinating ideas between the academic and business worlds.
So it seems like there's a lot of nuance to this whole R&D discussion.
Yeah, for sure. But here's the thing. Even with all those challenges, there are Australian businesses doing some pretty amazing things when it comes to R&D. And that brings us to our case study, a company called Bugs for Bugs.
Okay, gotta admit, when I first heard that name, I thought it was some kind of insect dating service. What is it they do?
Haha, not quite a dating service, but it is about relationships between bugs. Bugs for Bugs is a company based in Queensland. They specialize in something called integrated pest management, or IPM for short.
IPM. Okay, fill me in.
So imagine this. Instead of spraying chemicals everywhere to kill pests, IPM is about finding targeted and sustainable ways to manage them. It's like having a little SWAT team of good bugs working for you.
Wow, that's way cooler than a dating service.
Yeah.
But why is this so important? What's wrong with just using pesticides?
Well, traditional pesticides, they can have some pretty bad side effects. The World Health Organization has actually linked them to some serious health risks for humans, like cancer, reproductive issues, even damage to our nervous and immune systems.
Okay, that's scary stuff.
Yeah.
I guess it's easy to forget about the long-term consequences of just spraying chemicals everywhere.
Yeah, and it's not just humans that are affected. Pesticides can also harm beneficial insects, like bees and ladybugs, and they can really mess up entire ecosystems.
So Bugs for Bugs is doing really important work then. Tell me more. How do they actually manage pests? without using all those harmful chemicals.
They're pioneers in what we call biological control. Basically, they find the natural enemies of pests, like predators and parasites, and use those to control the pest populations.
Wait, so they're like bug bounty hunters. They find the bugs that eat the bad bugs.
You got it. And they're really committed to R&D to make sure they're using the best methods. They work with universities. And the CSIRO, that's Australia's National Science Agency, and even the Department of Agriculture.
Wow, they're not messing around. But all that research has got to be expensive. How do they manage to fund it all?
Well, that's where the Australian government comes in. They have this program called the Research and Development Tax Incentive, or the RNDTI. It gives companies tax breaks based on how much they spend on R&D.
So it's like the government is saying, hey, we want you to innovate, so
Yeah.
we're going to help you out. That makes sense. But has it actually helped Bugs for Bugs?
It's been huge for them. According to the company's founder, a guy named Dan Popacek, R&D is inherently risky. You don't always know if the research will succeed, but the RNDTI reduces that risk because the government shares some of the financial burden.
I see. So they can take bigger risks because they know the government had their back.
Exactly. And because of that, they've been able to do some incredible things. They've dedicated between 30 and 40% of their budget to R&D.
Whoa, that's a lot. Most companies wouldn't even consider that. What have they been able to do with that kind of investment?
They've been able to hire a bunch of highly skilled researchers. And get this, they've developed over 10 new species, specifically for natural pest control.
10 new species. That's amazing. Can you give me an example? What kind of research are they doing?
Sure, one of their projects is focusing on the two-spotted spider mite. It's a huge problem for farmers. It attacks so many different crops. Bugs for Bugs is looking at different biological control methods to find the most effective and sustainable way to manage those mites and protect crops.
Wow. So they're not just finding natural predators. They're actually doing research to find the best ones for different situations.
Yep, pretty impressive stuff. It shows how Australian companies can not only survive, but really thrive in this R&D space, especially when they have support.
It really is an inspiring story. But Bugs for Bugs is just one example. What about the bigger picture? What's the impact of R&D in Australia overall?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Yeah, the impact of R&D in Australia goes way beyond just, bugs and pest control. It's a major part of their economy, actually.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I always think of Australia, for the beaches, the outback. I've never really thought about them as a, research and development hub.
Well, think about this. The Australian government's investment in R&D has led to over 13 billion Australian dollars being put back into their economy.
Whoa, $13 billion. Now, that's what I call return on investment. But what are they developing exactly? What's having such a big impact?
It's a really diverse range. It's everything from, new medical tech to renewable energy solutions, even advances in agriculture and mining.
So it's not just like fancy gadgets. It's about finding solutions to actual problems and making industries better, more efficient, more sustainable.
That's it. And that's why companies like Bugs for Bugs are so important. Their research isn't just about protecting crops. It's about producing food sustainably and, reducing our reliance on those nasty chemicals, which has a ripple effect throughout the whole agricultural industry
Yeah.
and beyond.
Yeah, it's crazy to think a company focused on bugs could have such a big impact on the world.
It shows how connected everything is. And when you have a government that supports R&D, it creates this amazing cycle of innovation and economic growth.
Speaking of government support, earlier we talked about those different perspectives on how the government should be involved in R&D. What's your take? Do you think they should offer more incentives? Or directly fund research? Or maybe like a combo of both?
It's a tough one. Both approaches have their pluses and minuses. Tax breaks can definitely encourage investment in R&D, but you don't always know if the money is being used effectively. Direct funding is more targeted, but it involves a lot of bureaucracy and oversight.
Right. It's like you want to give companies the freedom to innovate, to come up with their own ideas, but you also want to make sure public money is being used responsibly.
For sure. And then there's also the question of collaboration. Remember Professor Barney Glover, his point about partnerships between businesses and universities. That's a super important part of the puzzle, too.
Yeah, it sounds like there's no easy answer. It's probably going to take a mix of everything.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about finding the right balance of incentives and funding and encouraging collaboration to create a healthy R&D ecosystem.
Okay, so we've talked about the economic side of things, the role of government. We even got to know some Australian bugs a little better. But what does this all mean for our listener? Why should they care about R&D, especially in a country that's so far away?
That's a great question. It's at the heart of why we do these deep dives. Even though Australia seems far away, the innovations happening there can impact all of us, no matter where we live.
Can you give some examples? I'm having trouble picturing how spider mites in Australia could affect my life.
Sure, let's think about it. Australia is a global leader in renewable energy. They're developing new solar technologies, wind power, even ways to get energy from the ocean. These discoveries could help us move towards a sustainable future, combat climate change, and that affects everyone.
Okay, I see what you mean. So even though the research is happening there, the benefits to be global, what else?
Well, Australia is also leading the way in medical research. They're making huge progress.
Yeah.
Things like cancer treatment, vaccines, even regenerative medicine. Remember we talked about Rick Holliday Smith and Cochlear Limited? They developed that hearing implant technology. That's helped people all over the world.
That's right. That kind of tech is amazing. It can really improve people's lives.
For sure. And that's just one example. Australia is also doing groundbreaking work in areas like AI, robotics, even space exploration. These advancements could change entire industries, create new jobs, and help us tackle some of the world's toughest challenges.
Wow, this is really eye-opening. I never realized how much was happening down there. I'll admit I was a little skeptical at first, but now I'm starting to see how important R&D is in Australia and everywhere, really. It can have a global impact.
It's all about pushing boundaries, finding new ways to make things better, and who knows, maybe some research happening right now will lead to the next big breakthrough.
Exciting to think about.
Definitely. But it's not just about waiting for the next big thing. We can all do our part to support R&D and encourage innovation, even in our own communities.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about big companies and institutions. It's about fostering that culture of curiosity, experimentation, problem solving. But how do we do that? What can everyday people do to support R&D and contribute to all this?
It's a big question for sure. How can we as individuals really contribute to this whole movement of innovation?
Yeah, it feels like a huge thing.
Well, it might seem daunting, but it can actually start with simple things like staying curious and learning about the latest scientific discoveries and advancements in technology.
So like reading articles, listening to podcasts, doing deep dives.
Exactly. The more you learn, the more you understand the challenges and the potential solutions out there. And that can spark your own creativity, your own problem-solving skills, even if you're not a scientist.
Right. But how about taking action? How can we contribute beyond just staying informed?
There are actually tons of ways to get involved, even locally. You can support businesses that are into R&D, especially small businesses, the ones taking risks, trying new things.
Oh, I like that. It's like putting your money where your mouth is. Supporting the companies pushing boundaries.
That's a great way to put it. And you can also get involved in citizen science projects. A lot of research institutions and organizations rely on volunteers to help with data collection, analysis, even testing new ideas.
Seriously. So you can help with real research without needing a PhD. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more popular. It's a fantastic way to learn new skills, meet people with similar interests, and contribute to scientific progress.
I'm definitely going to check that out. Sounds fun. Who knows, maybe I'll discover a new bug species.
Well, maybe not a new species, but the point is to stay engaged, keep learning, don't be afraid to ask questions, and challenge the way things are done.
That's some solid advice. So to wrap up our deep dive into R&D in Australia, I think the key takeaway is innovation is happening everywhere. And it's not limited to labs or universities. It's something we can all be a part of.
Couldn't agree more. Whether you're a scientist, an entrepreneur, a student, or just someone curious about the world, you can contribute to this global movement of innovation.
So to our listener, we'll leave you with this thought. What small step can you take today to support R&D, to foster a culture of innovation in your own life, in your community? Maybe it's reading about a new discovery, volunteering for a project, or even just having a conversation with someone about a problem you're passionate about.
Yeah, every bit makes a difference. Remember, innovation starts with curiosity, and that spark can ignite anywhere, at any time.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.